This is being broadcast all throughout Westminster, Canterbury here, so we all need to use microphones. And also during the question period, if you would raise your hand when you have a question, then we'll bring the microphone over so that all the other residents that will be watching this can hear the question. We want to welcome you to this first of 3 two-hour sessions. This one, of course, is on advanced medical directives. This next one, next month, on the first Tuesday. I think that's right, isn't that, Lauren? The first Tuesday of September. And then there will be, pardon? Then the final one will be September 30th. The second one is on powers of attorney, and the last one is on wills. The group in charge decided to have more time spent on each 3 items because when we had our big event back in the spring, there were so many questions on these particular aspects that we decided to put 2 hours on each one so that we could go more in depth about it. This, of course, is sponsored by TRIAD and SALT. TRIAD is the 2 law enforcement in Winchester, the city sheriff and the city Winchester Police Department and the Frederick County Police Department, plus the Attorney General of State of Virginia's office. So that makes up the triad, the city, the county, and the Attorney General's office. And the worker bees are known, and I mentioned SALT, that's seniors and law enforcement together. And my wife is the head co-chair. I'm the second co-chair of the particular committee. And she had a knee replacement a week ago Thursday, so she didn't quite want to come up here in her rolling walker, but she's getting along very well. The mission statement for the Winchester Frederick County TRIAD is committed to improving the quality of life for our seniors by enhancing their health, safety, and security through communications, education, and outreach. So the idea here is we want to make sure that as many seniors as possible are educated on the various aspects of senior living. And there's, of course, more and more of us as we go along. We meet on a regular basis. The SALT Council meets on a regular basis to develop, expand, and implement effective crime prevention and educational program for seniors. We also work to improve the overall quality of life for seniors in the community. And as I mentioned before, this includes the law enforcement people, the service providers, seniors, and elected officials. Now, when I say service providers, most of the health care service organizations within Winchester, Frederick, and the surrounding area are all members of this SALT Council. I'd like to take a minute here, Jennifer, if you want to make a couple announcements about Westminster, Canterbury, and where certain facilities are.
Good morning. Thank you, George. It's funny, if anybody ever confuses my name, they call me Jennifer, but I'm actually Stephanie. You join the ranks of my beloved, it's fine. But my name is Stephanie Landis. I'm the Director of Development and Community Relations, here at Westminster, Canterbury. And we're just thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for coming out. Just a couple housekeeping things as we get started this morning. If you will, please turn your cell phone on to vibrate or to off. We don't want to be that person, right? And then secondly, our bathrooms, if you go right out these double doors, they're going to be right to your left. So feel free if you need to excuse yourself during the program. Anything else I'm forgetting? Wonderful. Well, again, we're just so thrilled to have you here. And again, when we come to the question session, please wait for a microphone to come to you to make sure that your question will be heard. Thank you.
Again, we want this as informal as possible, so if you decide you want some more coffee or something to eat, just stand up and go over there and get it, maybe at the appropriate time in the question and answer period or whatever. Okay, well, we'll move ahead with the program, and I'd like to introduce Josh Hummer, who's with Lawson & Selleck law firm here in Winchester. He's a member of the council, and all of this was put together while my wife and I were gone, so it's all going to be kind of, I think I know what's on the program, but it'll be new to me also. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Josh.
Thanks, George. Good morning. You all are going to have to help me. PowerPoint is not something I'm very good at. And here's what I tend to do. I tend to forget about it. So if I start talking about something that's not up on the screen, I need to know. Can you do that? All right. The other thing I tend to do when I talk is I like to walk. I like to move around. But I've been told I cannot do that. I've been told I have to stand here or I can move to the right. But you all can't see this. There's about a 3-inch of space here. So I'm stuck. So if I start fidgeting or twitching, you just have to bear with me. All right? My name is Josh Hummer. I'm an attorney. That's the term we prefer. Lawyer's a bad term. Attorney is a nice term. I'm an attorney here in Winchester. My office is about 300 yards away, just right across the street, right across Route 522 there. And I'm with the law firm of Lawson & Selleck. Last name is Hummer, Hummer. And I am a member of the SALT Council. And just to reiterate what George said, what we're doing here today is a follow-up to our big session that we had back in May or April and March. I was going in the right direction. Back to the big session we had in March, and hopefully some of you were able to attend that. It was a great session. We had a number of different presentations on everything from financial abuse to recommendations by a physician to we actually had a police officer come. Captain Beckman came and gave presentations on some of the scams that are going around. And then I spoke as well on both advanced medical directives and powers of attorney. And we sent out surveys. And the feedback we got back, which was shocking to me, was that people wanted to know more about powers of attorney and advanced medical directives. So we put together this session. And as George mentioned, we're going to have 3 sessions, the first on advanced medical directives, the second on powers of attorney, and the third on wills. And if you don't know what some or all of those are, that's okay. That's what we're going to tell you about. And we're going to tell you why we think you need them. All right. Today's session is going to be focused on advanced medical directives. And let's see if I know how to work this button. Nope. Hey, there we go. It worked. We're off to a good start. And what I want to talk to you about today is advanced medical directives, what it is, why you need it, and how to get it. Everybody with me? Talk about what it is, why you need it, and how to get it. And then we have a couple special guests here who are going to follow up on what I say and hopefully fill in some of the gaps of stuff I forgot or stuff I don't know. Before I start, though, I always try to inject a little humor into all of my speeches. And I find that for some odd reason, everybody seems to think lawyer jokes are funny. So if it's okay, just to lighten things up, I'd like to share a lawyer joke with you. Is that all right? Everybody okay? All right. And if you know the answer to this, please feel free to shout it out. How do you know a lawyer is lying? That's right. Yeah. I guess. Okay, there you go. You've heard that one. All right. What a medical directive is. Now, first of all, nobody panic. We're going to go through this definition slowly, and I'm going to break it down. But I just want to give it to you so you get the complete official definition of a medical directive. It's an advanced directive. It's a legal document that communicates your wishes about health care before you cannot speak for yourself. It may be used to designate another person to make medical decisions for you, as well as to grant authority for or refuse certain treatments. let's take that step by step. An advanced medical directive is a legal document. What does that mean? That means it's enforceable. That means if you have one, your doctor or your family can't override what you put in this document. It's like a will. It has the force of law behind it. That tells your doctor when you can't tell them. All right, so this is the next part. An advanced medical to allow you or your loved one to speak for themselves or speak for yourself when for some reason you're not able to. And it could be any number of reasons. It could be that you're unconscious. It could be that you have lost your mental facilities. You're in a state we call incompetence. It could be you're just in so much pain that you're unable to focus properly on and listen to the doctor and make decisions for yourself. But it is not, and it does not apply to make decisions for you when you are able to make them for yourself. And this is a concern we get a lot from people. They say, look, I don't want to sign anything that's going to give somebody power to tell the doctor to do something that I don't want the doctor to do, or to tell the doctor to do something that I don't want them to do. That is not what an advanced medical directive does. Instead, it only speaks for you when you can't speak for yourself. If you're able to talk and you're able to communicate, it doesn't apply. So it tells your doctor when you can't tell them, the first thing, what type of care you want. And this is as broad and as vague as it sounds. You can be specific or you can be very vague about the types of care you want when you specify them in an advanced medical directive. You can say, I don't want this type of drug. You can say, I don't want this type of treatment. You can say, for this type of illness, I don't want any treatment. You can be as vague or specific as you want to. There's only one requirement. The doctor has to be able to understand. And so what we recommend is when you are filling these out, and we're going to send around some forms later, and there's some forms available up here of advanced medical directives, you'll see they have some suggested language. And if you want to be safe, you stick with that. However, feel free, and there's space for this, to write in additional items, additional concerns, or treatments you do want or treatments you don't want. And the next issue, so it does, this is the first of two things, what type of care you want. The problem is, of course, that we're not psychic. None of us are. And we can't predict exactly what type of treatment we're going to need. And so in order to cover that, the Advanced Medical Directive also allows you to designate who you want to make medical decisions for you. And so this doesn't mean that this person gets to overrule what you've already put in your Advanced Medical Directive. And your Advanced Medical Directive specifies what type of care you want. So if you say, I don't want this type of treatment, when you designate someone as your agent or proxy or attorney, they're all interchangeable words, they don't get to come along after that and change what you already specified. However, if there isn't guidance in your Advanced Medical Directive, and then there's still a decision to be made and you are not able to make it, then the physician will ask whoever you've specified in the Advanced Medical Directive what they think you would prefer them to do. And that's what the statute says. That's what the law says. This person doesn't get to make a decision based on what they want or based on what they think. They're required to do what they think you would do. And if they don't know, they're required to do what would be in your best interest. All right, so that is my paraphrase of what an Advanced Medical Directive is. And by the way, if you have questions, you've already been told, speak up, raise your hand, and we'll also have a time for questions later after everyone speaks. And that will give you the opportunity to ask me and then also a number of the other experts we have any questions you have about any of this. Another thing I want to do is go over some related terms, because I think a lot of the confusion about Advanced Medical Directives comes from the fact there are all these terms floating around out there, and you've probably heard some of them. And I want to just cover them very briefly to explain how they fit into the Advanced Medical Directive, the one that's currently in place in Virginia. First is a living will. How many people have heard of a living will? I think pretty much everybody's heard of a living will. Okay. The living will is not what we call it in Virginia anymore. However, what used to be a living will is now part of the Advanced Medical Directive. Living wills used to be a way you could designate the type of care that you wanted when you weren't able to make the decisions, when you're unconscious or incompetent. And now we have advanced medical directives, which allow you to do the same thing. But they also allow you to designate a power of attorney or an agent or a proxy. And so you may have also heard the term medical power of attorney or power of attorney. There are two types of powers of attorney. There's a financial power of attorney, which gives someone the ability to make financial decisions and business decisions for you. And then there's the medical power of attorney. And the Advanced Medical Directive also does this. You heard me mentioning earlier how it allows you to designate someone for you if you haven't already spelled it out. The medical power of attorney is that. So both of those are contained in what we're now calling the Advanced Medical Directive. We also have another term that's used as a durable do not resuscitate order. How many people have heard of this? Yeah, and actually we have Lieutenant Whitaker is here from the Frederick County Fire and Rescue Department, and he's going to give you a little bit more detail on these. But this is not an advanced medical directive. A durable do not resuscitate order is not an advanced medical directive. It is a form that you and your physician fill out when you are seriously ill, and in fact I think the term is actually terminally ill. You and your physician can fill out this form. It's a special form, and you fill out whether you want, and in this case you don't want, to be resuscitated, and Lieutenant Whitaker will have more information on that for you. But that is not an advanced medical directive. An advanced medical directive is also not a physician's order for scope of treatment. How many of you have heard of a physician's order for scope of treatment? A few. It's not law in Virginia yet, but it's similar to a do not resuscitate order, but broader, and they go by post, most, pulse, most, and my favorite, T-POP. But we don't have those yet. We expect they'll be coming soon, but they also are not an advanced medical directive. They're something you and your physician fill out when you are seriously ill to provide for care, to provide for a certain type of treatment based on what illness you have. All right, so that's what it is. That's what an advanced medical directive is. And remember, we're talking about three things: what they are, why you need it, and how to get it. So next, why do you need this? And hopefully some of this is going to be common sense now that we've gone over what they are. The key reason you need an advanced medical directive is you may not be around to or your doctor what type of treatment you want or do not want. And what I mean by that, and that's poorly worded, is you may not be able to do that. And the reason this is a problem, this wouldn't be a problem, right, if doctors did exactly what we wanted them to do. If doctors knew exactly what type of treatment you wanted. But doctors, they're great, but they have a certain code, and they actually take an oath, the Hippocratic Oath. Everybody's heard of that. And the oath is to save lives. And so their goal is to keep you alive as long as possible. And that's wonderful. But if you take a minute, and we all know of people who've had a horrible end-of-life experience. And through great skill and great ability, doctors have kept them alive when they were suffering terribly, perhaps unconscious or certainly not in their right mind, and went to great lengths in the last few weeks or few months of them alive. And for some of them, if you could go back in time, if you could take a time machine back to a year before, 2 years before, and you were able to tell them, hey, look, here's what's going to happen to you. You're going to have this type of illness, you're going to be in this much pain, and you're going to endure while all your relatives stand around watching you suffer. Do you want to go through that or not? I think a lot of people would say, you know what, I'll pass. I'm just going to just let me go. And this is where I think one of the key reasons for advanced medical directives comes in, is that toward the end of life, often a doctor's desire to keep someone alive or to use all of the care they possibly can diverges and is not the same as what that person would actually want if they were able to speak for themselves. And when they are, they're able to communicate clearly and say, you know what, I don't want any more. When they're not, though, you end up with these just described. So this is one of the main problems, one of the main reasons we recommend people get advanced medical directives. Other issues are family arguments. Folks, I get people coming to see me on a regular basis who are very upset with how the care of a loved one has been handled. They think something should have been done differently. They think that certain treatment should have been allowed or not allowed. And they're often seeking a legal solution. What they don't realize is that for me to go and talk to a judge and get a judge to appoint a guardian and get the guardian sworn in and get all that done in time to actually make a difference is really most of the time impossible. It just doesn't happen. And so in many cases, the exact opposite of what the person who is suffering would have wanted happens. They continue suffering, they pass, and their family splits as a result. Now, none of us want, I think I can speak frankly and freely and speak for all of us, that's not something we want. We don't want, through this type of situation, to have a family argument result, but I've seen many family splits because of this. This is a very real problem. And having an advanced medical directive, having something that spells out the type of care that you want and who you want to make the decision, it doesn't eliminate these problems, but it decreases them substantially because everybody knows what you want or what the person who is executing the advanced medical directive wants. The other is the cost of medical care. Now, some of you may really like paying medical bills. You may think that's wonderful and you're happy to contribute to Winchester Medical Center. That's not me, and I think that's not most people. And the one thing that may surprise you, it shocked me, and I'll just ask you, maybe we have some smart people in here, you all probably know this. How much of Medicare payments do you think, what percentage do you think are used in the last 2 months of if you could break it down over the average, the different time span that Medicare payments are used, what percentage do you think would go toward the last 2 months of people's lives? 80 or 90. It's not quite that much. It's 40%. 40% of Medicare payments go toward care in the last 2 months of people's lives. And again, another problem we see is that people will go back to my earlier analogy. When somebody is suffering toward the end of their life, doctors are doing everything they can to keep them alive, and that's not cheap. And they will end up spending tens of thousands of dollars a day, hundreds of thousands of dollars a week, depleting their savings to keep them alive in a suffering state they never wanted to be in. And then they have nothing to pass on to their children. So the cost of medical care is another reason you do want a medical directive. And the last reason, or not the last reason, but the last one I'm going to go over is something we've already talked about, and that's avoiding the type of treatment you don't want. Now, we also find various people have certain religious issues with different types of treatment, and the advanced medical directive allows them to make sure that they're not subjected to those types of treatment, or perhaps they're just like my dad. My dad is absolutely paranoid about the iron lung. How many of you know what the iron lung is? I don't even think they use it anymore. But he watched his father get an iron lung put in and just absolutely hated it. And he has told me dozens of times, no matter what happens, never, ever do that to me. And so perhaps you have something like that and you just want to make sure that doesn't happen to you. The advanced medical directive is a great way to do that. All right, that's why you need it. Fortunately, though, you may not believe me. I'm an attorney. I just told a joke about how attorneys lie. So, we have a number of lawyers. Thank you, George. I'm an attorney. Lawyers lie. But in case you don't believe me, I've brought a few friends. We have Lieutenant Kelly Whitaker is here from the Frederick County Fire and Rescue Department, and he's going to talk to you in a few minutes about do not resuscitate orders, durable do not resuscitate orders. We also have Lisa Dellinger, who's an RN. She's an ICU nurse. Did I get that right? ICU nurse at the Winchester Medical Center. She's going to talk to you as well about how those come into play. And then lastly, we have Reen Markland, who's a faith community nurse at the Winchester Medical Center. And she's explained to me what a faith community nurse is. But I'm going to let her tell you because I probably won't get it quite right. But we have all three of them are going to come up and speak for a few minutes after I'm done. And I'm almost done, I promise. But they're going to also tell you why they think advanced medical directives are important. But before I close, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is how to get advanced medical directives. Now, this is one of the confusing parts about advanced medical directives. You could create an advanced medical directive with the pad in front. You could write out on it, I want this type of care, I don't want this type of care. Sign it, and then get 2 people as your witnesses to sign it, and you have an advanced medical directive. I don't recommend that. Here's the reason. It is an advanced medical directive under law. But how is the advanced medical directive going to be used? Well, it's going to be used when you're not there, or you're there but you're not mentally there. And a doctor is going to be looking at it. And what do doctors worry about? Exactly. Doctors worry about being sued. And they worry that they're going to wake up and you're going to say, actually, I didn't want that type of treatment. Or you don't wake up and your family decides they didn't like how the doctor treated you. So doctors are very, very cautious. And so we recommend people use, if not the standard form that's written by the General Assembly, and Reen has very kindly brought copies, and you'll see them up there, and we have some to pass around as well. Either the standard form or recognized form. And there's also the 5 Wishes form you may have heard of. Hospice uses this, and I believe we have some copies of that as well, which is actually more than an advanced medical directive. It has some other information in it that's I think, very helpful. And there are various other forms, but some type of official form. And I'll be honest with you, as an attorney, my preference is for the official form, the one the General Assembly did, the standard form. I realize it's got some legal language in it. We call it legalese, but it's worth muddling through that, I think, to make sure you have the standard form. And I feel much more comfortable saying that a doctor is going to abide by that, and I think a doctor feels more comfortable if he's looking at that. I haven't taken a poll of them. That's just my 2-cent opinion. So those are the different forms. That's the first step to get the form. Now the places you can get it here. You can also go talk to an attorney, and they're happy to draft one for you at a cost, of course. Winchester Medical Center certainly has them. Online, we're going to put a link to a number of forms that the Virginia State Bar has. We're going to put that link on the Winchester Police Department's website. So feel free to go there. And then TRIAD. And I'm going to take just a minute here and toot TRIAD's horn and also Stephanie's horn. Each of you has in front of you what TRIAD has put together called the File of Life. And Stephanie has put these together for us, and I believe the original idea came from Sue Vantine over at the Willows. But this is basically something you put on your refrigerator, and it has a number of key documents in it. And so that if for some reason somebody ever needs to come in and get some information about you, they have this red File of Life on your refrigerator they can quickly run to, pull up, and it has all sorts of things in it. You've been given a number of sample copies. But to the extent you want to put a copy of your advanced medical directive in there, that's fine. All right, so those are the different places you can get one of the forms. The last thing I'm going to do, and this is kind of a surprise, I didn't put it on my outline. I want to give you very briefly 6 tips for advanced medical directives. These are things that I always tell my clients when they come in and they're drafting them, and I want to share them with you because I think they are important. The first, and this goes for any legal document, folks, and I can't stress this enough, and I know how hard it is, and I know how boring legal documents are, but you have to read them. You have to read them carefully, and you have to understand them. There's no pride here. If you don't understand something in advanced medical directive, if it's a medical issue, talk to your physician. If it's a legal word, go talk to an attorney. The next tip, ask an attorney if you have questions. If you're not sure, go speak to somebody. Go pay an attorney and figure out, make sure you get this right. As we talked about earlier, the cost practically can be substantial in the medical bills that you incur and can be priceless in the type of treatment that you're subjected to. The third, be careful who you make your agent. I think this is common sense, right? But be careful who you give the authority, whether to pull the plug on your life and decide what type of treatment you want. I mean, these types of people, these types of powers are very broad. And this person will essentially be able to say the same thing, act in your shoes. And you want to make sure that you have somebody who's trustworthy. The fourth thing is talk to your family and your agent. So even after you fill this out, it doesn't stop here. You need to sit down with your family and your proxy, and you need to have a heartfelt, detailed conversation about what you want, even if it's in the advanced medical directive. Because there very well may come up situations there, and your agent and your family, if you've had these types of conversations, will be in a much better position to make decisions for you if you've had this type of conversation. Fifth tip, tell your family where you store it. We had an incident happen down in Florida with a good friend of mine, and they could not find the advanced medical directive because he put it on top of his refrigerator. He thought everybody would know to look on the top of his refrigerator. Nobody did. And so it took them 3 days to find it and actually find out the type of care that he needed. All right. What we're going to do now is that only 5? And I said 6, didn't I? It could either, I'm bad at math. Oh, I'm sorry. This is my skill with PowerPoint is coming through. The last one didn't make it up there. It's actually number 2, but you can put it at the end. Make sure the rules. And this is another reason to use the forms. There's only 2 requirements for advanced medical directives. And these 2 requirements are that it has to be in writing and it has to be signed by 2 witnesses and by you. And so when you're filling out the form, make sure you fill out the form. Don't leave something blank and think it'll be okay. And particularly don't leave the signature blank. And make sure you have 2 witnesses. And we encourage people, and this is not required, but it's a tip, don't use the same person who is acting as your agent for one of the witnesses. It is technically allowed, but then there's an argument, a legal argument under law that they have some sort of conflict. And you don't need that. So just be safe. Get 2 other witnesses beside the person who's actually being your agent. All right. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My math is straight. The PowerPoint is not perfect. Okay. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to turn things over to Kelly Whitaker, who's the lieutenant with the... Oh, yes, ma'am. We have a question for those who are watching via video.
What do you mean by agent?
Great question. Agent is the person who you appoint to make decisions for you as in your advanced medical directive. You'll hear me, and I was using jargon there. I apologize. Agent, proxy, power of attorney, they all mean that same person. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any reason, if you fully trust your spouse, not to make them your agent?
There is no reason not to make your spouse your agent. Yes. The only reason, there's only a slight caveat to that, and that is it's normally a good idea to have a successor agent. And you'll see many of these forms have a place for a successor agent. And that certainly applies not just if you make your spouse your agent, but if you make anybody else, because your spouse passed or something else may have happened. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
Would the latest medical directive from Virginia, what year was it written?
I believe that the most recent one was redone in 1992. There may have been substantive revisions.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 2012. I don't know where. I was thinking two. I believe it was redone in 2012, but I'm not sure about that.
So ones that were written up before then, are they still valid in Virginia?
They are still valid, assuming they were valid when they were done, and assuming they comply with the statute, they should still be valid in Virginia. I would have to look at it to know if it was still valid.
Okay.
Now.
I believe at the time we had to have it notarized. Do they still need to be notarized?
They're not required to be notarized. There's
They're not.
no
Okay.
requirement for a notary with an advanced medical
Okay.
directive.
One of our witnesses has since died. Is that still in effect? Then is it still a valid document?
It is. The only reason would be is if that and said, actually, I don't think that person signed it. It would be nice to have that individual alive, but it still is a valid advanced medical directive, and physicians should rely on it.
And my last question, are the Virginia directives valid in all states?
Again, they should be. Virginia has what's called, the legal term is comity, but Virginia has reciprocal agreements and has agreed to validate or use or recognize the term I'm looking for, agreements from other states. So other states should use and accept a Virginia one. That being said,
Yeah, it varies, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any more questions before we turn things over to Lieutenant Whitaker? Yes, ma'am. Can you hold on just a second? We're sorry. We're recording this, and we've also got it streaming.
In light of what she has,
Yes, ma'am.
if we are traveling to other states, would you advise these documents to accompany us?
Absolutely.
Such as passport.
No,
other
that's
things
a
that we
great
need?
question. I would advise that you take, if you are traveling, that you take your a copy of your power of attorney with you.
Copies are okay. You
Copies
do not
are
have to
important
take
for
the
us.
original.
We do recommend that people have multiple originals.
Multiple originals.
Yes, but your copy is enforceable. But again, if you're trying to avoid any issues or questions, the best case is to have an original with you. You can sign multiple versions, multiple copies,
originals.
multiple originals, and have one of those with you. Is that required? No. But again, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make it really easy for the physician to do what we want them to do.
Thank you.
Sure. Great question.
Josh, I know that some things have changed over time with several of these. As you mentioned, 2012 was the latest. How often would you recommend that you really go back and re-look at your advanced medical directive every 5 years, every 2 years? What would you suggest as a recommendation?
I really don't have a specific time frame. It's whenever you feel like something has changed or some issue has come up in your life. Certainly every 5 years, I would think you would want it to be at least that often. Good question. Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
One other comment, when you were talking, you almost intimated when you need to sign these when you were almost out of it. You want to do this way ahead of time.
If I said that, I apologize. No, you want to sign these now. When you are almost out of it, most likely you will not be allowed to sign this. You have to sign this while you're legally competent, and that means that you're educated for yourself. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question about your DNR. You said something about when you're in a terminal medical condition or something, that's when you want a DNR. I thought you could do that way ahead of time and say, look, I don't want to be resuscitated. If there's no chance of me being me, I don't want to be resuscitated.
You can put that into an advanced medical directive, yes, ma'am. But there is a specific form called a DDNR, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait and allow Lieutenant Kelly to talk about those, and he's going to tell you how those are used. They're used a little bit differently from the advanced medical directives, and he's going to explain those to you and how they come into play. But you can certainly put that into your advanced medical directive. Keep in mind that advanced medical directives, and Lieutenant Whitaker will get into this, only apply to doctors. Okay? That's the only people required to abide by them. Great questions. All right. Yes, ma'am.
If you change your mind and you want a new agent,
Great question.
and you have this document at your doctor's office and hospitals and everyone that needs it, what's the proper procedure to withdraw the old document and put the new document into effect?
It's to send them a copy or give them a new document with a subsequent date on it, and to the extent you can get your hand on any of the copies, certainly you tear it up. Unfortunately, with all the electronic medical records, actually getting those copies out of the circulation is impossible, but you want to give them a new one and make sure it's dated with a later date than your old one. But that brings up another great point. You can revoke advanced medical directives at any time. You can even do it orally. So if you decide you don't like it, you can just say it's gone. Your oral statement is sufficient legally to revoke it. Now, if nobody knows you said it, then it doesn't really work. So we always recommend, if you do want to change it, to the extent you can get a hold of physical copies, tear those up. To the extent you can't, make sure you give somebody a new copy with a later date on it.
The electronic thing you were talking about, I think it's very good that we're doing some of these things electronically and getting more and more, but I think there's going to be a major problem involved in something of this nature and so forth, because we've experienced already just in the last couple of months where some of the things, and it wasn't regarding any of this, but just some medications and some of this type of stuff is incorrect on our medical records, and they're going to have a hard time getting all of this stuff corrected. I know that they're just starting it, and maybe it will come, but we all have to be very, very careful of this electronic age.
You certainly do. We'll certainly have time for more questions after everybody's done, but I'm going to turn things over to Lieutenant Whitaker, and he's going to talk to you about, I guess, the non-use of advanced medical directives and DDNRs.
Good morning again to everyone. Thank you again for coming out to this presentation. It's definitely a good opportunity for me to get out just to be able to speak to some other people other than just EMTs for once in a while. As Josh said, my name is Kelly Whitaker. I'm a training officer for Frederick County Fire and Rescue. I'm the EMS training officer, actually. And part of my job is obviously to teach EMTs and paramedics and all that, but also again, talk about DNRs and how they work towards your behalf on emergencies. Because again, there's been a lot of times where we respond to your house, you're incapacitated, or maybe there's something that we're not sure exactly what's going on. And I will praise TRIAD for this file of life thing. This is one part that would definitely help us in the what's going on issue that we have nowadays when we do arrive at houses and maybe there is an emergency that we're not sure exactly what your medical conditions are. So if you can post those, that definitely helps us out. I will praise them for that. Along with that, like you mentioned, the DDNR, which has been out around since the mid-90s, mainly affects EMS, but it also does in a hospital as well. And I'm going to kind of give you a little brief information about that as we go through here and talk about some other DNR stuff that's out there, not just a physical form, but there's necklaces. Some people are actually tattooing DNR on their chest, which is a little extreme, but it's possible, I guess. And then you can use in case you're out traveling and you don't want to have to carry the paper with you, because again, it's a legal document and you really don't want to lose this thing. This is what it looks like. This form is furnished by the Virginia Department of Health, and as someone mentioned, you can get it at any time. DNRs used to be, back in when they first came out, it was mainly terminally ill adults. That's the only ones that could actually get the form. And it had to be one of those things where the doctor actually offered you the form and you would get it signed from that point further. Because of some changes in I believe it was like 2008, 2009, they actually now allow anyone at any age group to get DNRs. Because we've actually seen with pediatric patients, cancer kids, that their families don't want their child to have to go through the resuscitation effort. So they've actually gotten a DNR for their child. And it's heartbreaking to see that, but at the same time, do you really want to see your kid with all the work that we're going to be doing pre-hospital or in hospital? You know, they've already been through enough. So the basically states that in an emergency to where you become pulseless and stop breathing, okay, two things have to kick in there. That is when the DNR actually takes effect. And that means we withhold resuscitation efforts. We don't do CPR. We don't defibrillate you. We don't put medications and airways in you, things like that. And basically, it's a form that you as a patient can sign or a family member can actually sign for the patient. If the patient itself is incapacitated, they're unable to sign for themselves, so they have like a medical power of attorney, as someone mentioned earlier, or if it's just, again, a situation where a family member feels that that's what they wanted for their parent. The patient has to have the form signed by a doctor, and I can't stress that one enough. You can apply for this form online and have it forwarded to you, but then you must take it to your doctor in order for it to become legally binding to us. And it's like I say, you can see the check boxes up here as you see. It's a yellow form, very distinguished. And if we come to your house and you say you're a DNR, the first thing out of our mouths are going to be, we need to see it. We have to have this form with us when we transport you to the hospital. We have to have verbal confirmation from the doctor in case you don't have it, saying that the DNR is on file, because again, the electric age is out there. It's going to be somewhere, this form is going to be present to where it's going to tell us whether or not you are a DNR or not. As far as other states, now I heard someone mention a minute ago, if you go from other states, you can take your forms with you. You can. DNR can't. Okay. The Virginia Department of Health will only allow you to use the Virginia DNR in Virginia. So if you go to New York, and I can only say this maybe like a post-Civil War thing or something, they're still mad at us, that's the only time they're going to say you can't have it. Okay? But any other time, I mean, it's going to be common sense. I hope that the doctor will say, okay, they had their wishes down there. Maybe they'll consult with your personal doctor down here and get their opinion and go from there. Obviously, as far as for Virginia DNRs, they can only be enacted in Virginia. So with us, if there is questions about DNR status, we always call medical control, which is the emergency room doctor that's on duty that day, and ask their opinion. So it's not going to be one of our decision makings at the end of the day. If the form is there, obviously we're going to abide by your wishes. If it's not there, there may be some care offered as far as resuscitative efforts until the medical control is confirmed and stuff. I know that in the past, I've had some couple cases to where, especially with family members, one family member says they're a DNR, another family member says it's not a DNR. We don't want to get in the middle. So we'll usually pull the patient out of the house or ask the family to go from one side of the house to the other. We'll call medical control and get their opinion. And then again, they're going to go through medical records to find out if the DNR status is present or not. As far as the DNR, it needs to be kept in certain areas. Because this is a legal doc, just like anything else, you don't want to lose it. So we always ask people to post this thing in certain areas, whether it be on the headboard of your bed, the refrigerator door, the back of your bedroom door, or if you have a medical bracelet or the little card that comes along with the form, somewhere where you know you can find it, or a family member can find it as well. And the DNR order can't be defaced. If it's been looking like it went through the washing machine, technically it's not supposed to be a legal document. It has to look pristine. It has to look like it just came off the floor. As far as renewals, can you do it every 3 or 5 years? I'm not real sure. I mean, once it's issued, it's pretty much it's valid until death. There's really no renewal. Now, can you destroy it? Absolutely. I'll talk about that here in a minute. So you can actually remove that DNR status from yourself. But as far as the document itself, you want it to be somewhere where it's not going to get tore up, because when it gets tore up, then there is questions of validity. The things we're going to do, we're not going to care. We're not going to stop care. Okay? DNR doesn't mean we're going to let you lie there and die. DNR means basically if you have a situation where you're suffering a medical problem, a trauma problem, whichever the case may be, we're not going to stop care for you. We're going to do everything up to the point of resuscitative efforts. Like I said, we're not going to do CPR or defibrillation, but if it's bleeding, if it's applying oxygen, pain management, something like that, we're going to do everything possible to make you comfortable. Okay? It does not mean we don't care. The one thing I will throw up there as far as the airway, a lot of people question if you're let's say you're aspirating on something's in your mouth and it's blocking your airway, and technically you stop breathing from that point. Could we not suction your airway? And I tell people flat out, if you witness that person was breathing when you got there, and you notice the last breath they took was because of whatever was ever in their mouth, get it out. They were still conscious, they were still breathing or whatever when you got there. Treat. If it doesn't correct after that, then obviously we'll go from the situation further. We got to be supportive, because this at this point, when this order comes into effect, obviously there's going to be a lot of grieving going on, a lot of confusion going on, and we want to really be supportive to the family, as well as to you. If you're still conscious, we're not going to not care for you. We're still going to do everything possible for you. If we need to call your doctor, make arrangements for family members, just contacts for family members, whatever the case may be, we're going to help out as much as we can. But things we're not going to do, like I said, CPR is the biggest thing. We're not going to start compressions. We're not going to start artificial breathing on you. We have a tool now called the Lucas device. I don't know if you read it in the paper a couple of weeks ago or months ago. That's basically a thing we put on your chest to do compressions for us, so we don't have to physically do CPR anymore. We're not going to defibrillate you. We're not going to offer medications that will resuscitate you. Things like that will not be enacted with the DD. And basically what that means is you're going to be allowed to die a natural death. Okay? That's what it comes down to. So I talked about revocation. The only person that can revoke this DNR is you. If you have a form and let's say you're having a medical problem and you're scared of dying, for example, what can you do? If we walk in, we say, we see your DDNR. I don't want to die. I don't want to not have CPR done to me. Keep me alive if you can. You can take that form, crumple it up, rip it in half, or you can tell us, don't abide by that DNR. And we accept that, okay? So that's the big thing about the DDNR. It does not mean that, 2 months from now, if the form's still present, and you're like, okay, I'm back to feeling better, but I just want to get that thing back to active status, yeah, you can put it right back to active status again. But at any time that you don't want to have this stuff withheld, you can actually verbally say it or destroy the form, and that's fine. The physicians and decision makers, they can't do it anymore. It used to be that the medical power of attorney had the ability to say, yeah, revoke the DNR status. But after 2008, they changed that law, and now it is where the patient is the only one that can revoke a DNR. It's a PowerPoint thing, I'm sorry. You realize PowerPoint was made for real estate agents, right? It was not made for education. It was made for real estate agents to show houses. It says physicians and authorized decision makers are no longer authorized to revoke the DDNR status with this new amendment. So again, it has to be just the patient that's the only one that can make the DDNR withdrawal status. This is actually a slide from the state, so blame the Commonwealth of Virginia because they came up with this slide scheme, and I don't like it either. As far as the DDNR storm, again, the Office of EMS, or we operate under Virginia Department of Health, has these forms available to you. You can request them from your doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, facilities, whatever the case may be. Any medical providing agency has the access to these forms and stuff. And the biggest thing about them is knowing where they're at. And like I said, if you go on the Virginia Department of Health's website, which I can give you the address, it's simple. It's vdh.virginia.gov. If you scroll all the way down at the bottom, there's a super link there that says DDNR. And you can get all the information I've just given to you. You can get this actually PowerPoint. You can get this PowerPoint from that site too. And then it'll give you information as far as how to get the form and stuff. I'll give you, well, actually I won't. There's actually, like I said, the bracelets that you can buy. They're like medical hospital bracelets that are just little blue stars of life that says do not resuscitate. And then it has your name pre-printed on it. Those work just as well. You can order those from that site as well. So,
do you mind repeating that
sure.
for them?
It's VDH, so Virginia Department of Health, .virginia.gov. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, that'll be good. So, yes, ma'am.
I've become confused during your talk. Sorry. But I pulled some forms up on the computer before I came here, and one of the things I read on the medical directive is that rescue operations who would come to a person's home because they're in dire need cannot honor a do not resuscitate form. But it sounds like you're saying the opposite. So which would be correct?
We can accept a DDNR.
You represent the rescue services, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what bothers me a little bit about what you've been saying, if a person requires rescue services and it would be an emergency situation and the personnel that came to the house would have to make a decision about whether this person was going to be dying or not, correct?
No, that's not our decision.
Okay, well,
our decision is that while you are breathing and have a pulse, okay, that's the two things that separate this form before we activate it. Okay, as long as you have those two things, we do normal care. There's nothing different here. Okay, now in the event that you go into cardiopulmonary arrest, okay, you stop breathing, your heart stops beating. Those two things happen, and you have a valid DNR in place, then we accept it. That's when we would not do it.
The thing is, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say this right, but how do you know that if you did resuscitate that person, that they could not have a normal life? Because, I mean, maybe it would just be a temporary. How would the personnel know that? Because, I mean, it's an emergency situation. You have to make a sudden decision.
Right. And I guess
It's kind of scary.
Let me give you two examples of that statement real quick here. Okay, let's say you don't have a DNR status with you, and we come in, we examine you, we find that you are pulseless, you are not breathing. So normal standard care for that situation is to start CPR and provide what we call ACLS, advanced medical care, advanced cardiac care. We get everything going, we resuscitate you, we get to the hospital, and come to find out that you did have a DNR status. So now it's a catch-22. We resuscitated you, and unfortunately, like I said, I can't make sure that even if we do start CPR and we do resuscitate you, will you be able to walk out of the hospital? That's the little decision above me. Okay. Let's say now you're in a situation where you're on a ventilator. You're not conscious. You're never going to regain consciousness or anything like that. You had a DNR status. From a legal standpoint, and I'm not sure if Josh can even give me an idea on this, can we be held responsible for that situation? Yes and no. I mean, we didn't know up front. And that's why, again, it's going to fall back to medical control. The doctor in the ER is going to be the one that's going to receive you when you arrive in an emergency room. They're going to make every decision up until the point to when you either get admitted to a floor or whatever. So from our standpoint, we have to go with what we're told. And unfortunately, the DNR is one of those things that it's like I said, it's one of those things we don't know what's going to happen. The second situation, like I say, we've resuscitated you, but unfortunately, you have a DNR status. If you're able to survive the event, that's great. If you can't, then obviously now that we know that you're a DNR, then once you collapse into the stop breathing or whatever, then obviously the DNR would take effect, and they would not offer the resuscitate. They would not resuscitate you again, basically. Let's see. Let's go back to the
Kelly, can I just interject quickly to clarify one thing that may help? We're talking about two different things here. We're talking about an advanced medical directive, which is a document which is binding on doctors. It doesn't apply to EMS. So when you have your advanced medical directive and the EMS people come and you hand it to them, they don't care. It doesn't apply to them. It applies when you get to the hospital and you get under a physician's care. There's this other document, the DDNR form, which does apply to them, and that's what Kelly's been talking about. So that's part of the confusion is on my fault there. So I wanted to clarify that.
I've probably confused you even worse than what it is. I'm sorry.
I understand that. I have another question.
Sure.
In a legal sense, what does the use of the word durable mean here?
Yeah, let's go to the attorney.
As far as the durable power of attorney versus just a normal power of attorney, what does
Durable
that
means
mean?
it continues to apply even when you are no longer competent, when you are either unconscious or no longer able to make a decision. Normally, under the law, if you just had a DNR, it would cease to apply when you were unable to make this decision. So it's a durable one.
Oh, I have a question.
Sure.
Just to clarify, the DDNR has to do with the EMS when they come to wherever you are when they're needed.
Again, and it goes back
And
to the
then the
durability thing. It can actually go into a facility. It can go into a hospital. It can cross any healthcare provider can accept a DDNR.
Oh, the hospital can too. So
sorry.
when does the
Right. It's generated by physicians, what she said. So any doctor can accept it.
when does the advanced medical directive take effect?
Let's think of it this way. 365 days a year, advanced directives is going to take care of you. That one day that you go into cardiac arrest is when the DDNR is going to take effect. When you stop breathing and you stop having a pulse. How's that?
Okay.
When you suffer that major emergency. But any other day of the week, an advanced directive is going to take care of you.
Yeah.
But
so,
the DDNR is very
But
specific.
if you, I don't know, when you stop breathing and don't have a pulse, like in an auto accident.
Yeah,
but then I would want to tried to be resuscitated for that.
Right.
So I wouldn't want a DDNR at that point.
So just to clarify, and maybe this helps. And again, I'll try to explain because I think I created the confusion in the first place. An advanced medical directive applies to physicians only. That's who it's binding on. Physicians in hospitals, but physicians in hospitals. So, and it is very broad. It can cover any type of care. DNR is a very specific document. It only applies to do not resuscitate, but it applies to all the different medical professionals. So you may need both. We certainly advise everyone to have an advanced medical directive, which covers a broad range of things. You may specifically decide that you want a DDNR, meaning you don't want to be resuscitated. You don't have to have one. There's no requirement. In fact, most people don't. And most people don't want one. If something happens to me, I want him to save me. I want Kelly to come in and do whatever he has to do to keep me living. And so then you wouldn't get one. But some people don't feel that way. Some people who've been through a lot, if for something happens, they would prefer not to be resuscitated.
Because you're
a lot of people with terminal illnesses is what Laura just said.
The advanced medical directive would take care of that later on. For someone to make that decision.
It would, but it may be too late. You may be, something may happen, you may stop breathing, and Kelly comes and starts you breathing again, and then they take you to the hospital and you're breathing. It's already been done, right? Yeah. Or that I think was your question, though. But hopefully that explains the differences a little bit better.
You need the original DDNR.
Yes and no. Okay, let's throw this one back, because again, this is another 2008. It used to be that physical form, that yellow form I showed you, had to be present. Even when we transported you, let's say from here to the hospital, we had to take that original form with you. Now, imagine how much of a paperwork nightmare that is for Westminster Canterbury, because they would look at you like that ain't happening. Because when they would go to the hospital, I'm not picking on the hospital because there's two people here, and they probably beat me because I know Lisa, she probably would. The hospital loses stuff. And we would have cases where family members would call us and say, I need a DNR. We don't have it. We gave it to the nurse at the ER. Well, they said that you all took it. Let's go back to the whole scheme of how we deliver things. We take you to the hospital. We leave you there, and hopefully you get better. And that's all there is. We never take anything back with us. And there would be cases where the doctors or the nurses in the hospital would be like, we need that form. Well, we don't have it. We gave it to somebody, and it created a paper nightmare. So 2008, they changed the rule. They said as long as there's a copy of that DNR, if you can take it with you, that's fine. So keep your original, and what I tell you now is take that original, make a photocopy, put your original in a savings box so somebody knows where it's at. So that way it's a legal document that's hidden somewhere that, again, it's not back to that crumpled piece of paper, hopefully, that might become an issue. That paper is easy for somebody to find and knows where it's at. The copy of it is fine. Okay?
Another thing that we did from nursing homes perspective was we made 4 copies, had them, and then each one was in the folder, and that took over. Each time you took one, then we had another copy to back it up, and it didn't matter if the hospital lost it. So that's an idea too.
And in facility-wise as well, your medication records, as far as your medication charts and stuff like that, I've noticed, especially here when I was actually in the field, they actually had down at the bottom a star, DNR, star, and that was acceptable too, because somewhere on file was a DNR status. I know a DNR sounds scary. It sounds like the worst-case scenario versus an advanced directive, and it's completely honest. I understand that. We're trying to help you understand that there is another form out there that, in case another major situation occurs, or you go into the event where you go into cardiac arrest, you stop breathing, you stop having a pulse, and especially if you don't want resuscitative efforts done to you, we have to have this form, because otherwise it's one of those things we have to do business as usual until we're told by medical control or another situation to where, stop the resuscitative efforts. Yes,
I was hoping that maybe my question will help clarify your question. I'm noticing that we cannot get the form without it coming through a medical procedure almost, or a medical individual.
It has to come from a doctor.
Is it true then, what I think I wrote down, you can only fill out a DDNR if you indeed have been diagnosed with a terminal? No. Okay, I missed that.
I'm 43 and 20-some-odd days. If I decide, you know what, I've seen this stuff, okay? I don't want it done to me. I can go on that link and I can fill out a form right now and take it to Dr. Gibbs, and Dr. Gibbs signs it. And I have a DDNR status, and I'm healthy, I hope. I have a physical in 20 days, I'll let you know. But that can be done by any of you in this room right now. It's just like an advance directive. If you get it done early, because again, you may never know what happens tomorrow. So it's just one of those forms we're trying to put out there to let you know that it is available. It is something that you're encouraged to get if you feel this way. Because again, if the form is not there, then we have to do resuscitative efforts.
What signatures are on a DDNR?
Okay, yours or your power of attorney, and then the medical director, or your medical physician. I'm sorry, your personal doctor. The physician that you go to. Yes, yeah. They actually, if let me go back to it. I didn't copy the back. I'm sorry. The back actually has where your signature is at. Down at the bottom is where your doctor is going to sign it. Okay. I don't know if the patient or your medical power of attorney. Okay. One of those two people has to sign the back of it, and then your doctor will sign the front of it. So. Yes, ma'am.
Aren't there states that where hospitals, once you are transported to the hospital, they must provide all the service? They must bring you back?
I mean, it's with our normal nature to do the best possible.
I thought legally. That I'm thinking of one particular state that the DNR did not transfer to that state.
Yeah, there are some states that will withhold the DNR. So that if you do walk in with, Virginia's different, obviously. Virginia has this form. But let's say you go to Maryland, and Maryland says we do not have a DNR program.
Does Maryland have one?
To top of my knowledge, I don't know. I know there are some states, but I'm not sure exactly which ones are there, that do not accept DDNR. Mm-hmm. So if you even walk in with that form, they're going to look at you and say, I'm sorry, we have to do resuscitative efforts to you.
Yeah.
So
I think Pennsylvania's one, too.
It may be. Like I said, I know there's only a couple. And to patient wishes, and if you stress enough, they might change that idea and say, okay, we accept yours. But normal business is to do the best possible. So, is there any other questions at this time? Like I said, we'll be here after this is all said and done, and we'll answer anything else that you may have. If you feel like you don't want to express it in front of, because I know this is confusing and it's very depressing, honestly. If you want to just come to me and ask me personally, I'll be over here at some point, and you can just do that as well. So, okay? I think Lisa is going to come up next and offer some information as well.
Hello, my name is Lisa Dellinger. I am an ICU nurse at Winchester Medical Center, and I've never lost anything. Just ask my children, they'll tell you. I always have everything. And you talked about the electronic record. We've had the electronic record for years, but now that we have Epic is in the newspapers. The electronic record can be confusing, but the electronic record is also good because once you bring your copy of your advanced medical directive in, we make copies of it and it's in the computer forever. And then you come in next year, we have it, we can look it up. You came in 2012, we can look it up. So it's there. So, and you do not have to bring it in when you're in the hospital. You could bring it in before you ever need to come to the hospital, so it's on file. But if you filled out your advanced medical directive and you haven't brought it to the hospital and you're critical, you come to the hospital with it. The family needs to bring a copy of it. The importance of an advanced medical directive, by the time you come to me, everybody is emotional, you're very sick, I'm going to ask, does anyone have an advanced medical directive? Well, the most common thing is, well, my spouse knows exactly what I want. Well, your spouse was in the same accident as you, and they're not now. So what are you going to do? I tell my husband knows exactly what I want. It's down on paper. I tell him I'm going to haunt him if he doesn't do exactly what I want. It's real important, whether you've told 10 people or one person, to get it on paper and to get someone that you trust and another person that you trust to write it down. Unfortunately, in my job, I see a lot of death, and I see a lot of suffering. People who come in, and their family members want the best. They want them to live forever. I just can't imagine life without my husband. I've been married 50 years. He means the world to me. He's not ever going to get better. No matter what we do, he's not ever going to get better. Yes, we can prolong his life, but he's not ever going to get better. Do you want your spouse suffering, or do you want your spouse to have a nice, peaceful death where you're at his bedside, we're providing the better is, and that you know that you are providing the love that is there. There's no emotion. You don't have to make those emotional decisions right then and there. Those decisions have already been made, and so all you have to do is sit and love your spouse. And that's the thing. My mother-in-law made me her medical power of attorney 10 years ago. We didn't have to use it until 2 years ago. And I thought that was going to be the easiest thing for me because I'm a nurse. I mean, I'm the patient's advocate. I do this all the time until that phone call came from the nursing home. And they said, we want to transport your mother-in-law to the hospital. And I had to tell them no. And the daughter-in-law started crying after she got off the phone because my mother-in-law is wonderful, you know. So the next day I went and talked to her, and I said, you know, Pat, I had to make one of those decisions last night. And I said, it was so hard for me. I just want to talk to you about it. And she looked at me and she goes, Lisa, you're not making your decisions. You're making my decisions that I told you. So all you're doing is being my voice. And I thought, oh, wow, you're right. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not making any decisions. These are your decisions that we talked about for years, that we wrote down. I knew exactly what she wanted because we had talked about it for years. And that's the important thing. You want to talk about everything. You know, do you want to be put on a ventilator? Do you want to be put on medication? Do you want CPR? Do you want to be a do not resuscitate? All those things are very important to talk about. Would you want a feeding tube? If you were put on a ventilator, how long would you want to be put on a ventilator? You know, these are some of the things that the doctors are going to talk to you about when you come in too. And the most important thing is to always bring the copies into the hospital. You know, some people just leave them at home and never bring them in, and by the time they get to the hospital, the situation is so that we don't have time to act on it, and we have to start treatment that the patient would not want. And so that's the most important thing. Yes, ma'am.
If you already brought an advanced medical directive into the hospital, you put it in Epic.
Yes, ma'am.
2 years down the road, something changes. So you want to make a new advanced medical directive. How do you change that with you all?
Bring a new copy in, and the old one is taken out and the new one's put in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do we take it to at the hospital?
Okay, Reen's going to speak to that. And, you know, when we talk about pulling the plug, we're really not pulling the, you know, we're there to make the best decisions. You know, I'm the biggest patient advocate. I'm there to make sure my patient is comfortable. If you, as a family member, has made the decision that your spouse, your daughter, your son, your husband, your cousin, whatever, wants to be taken off machines, then that's exactly what we do. We do it comfortably. We do it with medication. We give them lots and lots of comfort, lots of time to spend with your spouse, lots of time to spend with your family. You know, we're not just stopping everything, and we don't stop the care. You know, just like Kelly said, it doesn't mean we don't care. We give that patient the same amount of care, whether they have an advance directive or they don't have an advance directive. You're just as important as the next person, and we just know exactly what your decisions are. It's hard to find out if you're sedated and on a ventilator. I wonder if this person would really want this. I mean, he's been on this ventilator for 2 weeks now. Now we're going to have to make a cut in his throat, down his throat, another way. Would he really wanted that? I wished he'd have spoken his wishes before this. You know, that's what we see. I'm at the bedside 12 hours. I see that patient for 12 hours. I see that suffering. I see the decisions that the families wish they had made first, you know, before the situation became so critical that they can't make those decisions now because the emotions are too high. And family arguments, you know, you have Cousin Joe who hasn't seen you in 10 years, but he's going to come and make his wishes known because he loved you like a brother, even though he hasn't seen you in 10 years. And he loves you much more than your son could possibly love you because your son wasn't there the first 2 years. You know, it's amazing. So if you have your wishes down, there's no arguing. There's no arguing because that's what you want. Any other questions?
I may have misunderstood you. Even though the hospital would have a copy on file, that the family should still bring a copy with them.
If the copy on file is accurate and current, then no, you don't need to bring a copy to it, as long as there's one on file. And that's the first thing we do. As soon as you come into the hospital, we look at your past medical records and we bring that up. And we say, look, I see that you have an advanced medical directive. Is this still correct? And we look at who your medical power of attorney is. And that's your person that we speak to. If anything were to be done, that's who we call, your medical power of attorney, if you're not able to speak.
I just had an experience at Winchester Medical about 2 weeks ago. I have medical power of attorney for my boyfriend, and we went into the ER in the middle of the night, and I gave it to the nurse, and she put it into the computer. And then when they admitted him and moved him up onto, they said, "Are you his wife?" And I said, "No." And it was sort of like, okay, what are you doing here? And I said, "I'm his medical power of attorney," and I produced the document and said, "It's in your computer." And their answer was, "But we won't be able to access that from here, so it's good that you have this."
Because you had just brought it in and it was just put in from
Right.
the ER. Right. If there's no copy on file, yes, you need to bring it in. And even though you show it in the ER, you still should bring it upstairs. And it doesn't matter how you're related, if you're related or not. You could be your next door neighbor.
Right.
I just had a patient who had no family, and someone from AA was his medical power of attorney, and they spoke for his wishes. You know, it was amazing, and how much they loved him. That was amazing. I really appreciated that. You know,
If you're just starting the process in a medical crisis, have that documentation on you everywhere you facility. Whip it out so you can
that's why it's so
still
important to
receive
do it now.
communication.
And you know, I know we're speaking to an older group now, but I'm 46. I'll be 46 in November, and I have an advance directive. You know, there's things I want, there's things I don't want, and it's important to do it now before you have to make those decisions, before they're so critical that you can't think, you're so emotional that you just can't think. And if your spouse is an emotional spouse, when my father was dying, he knew my mother would never be able to make those decisions, and he didn't want her to have to, even though they were written down in his decisions. You know, he made me his medical power of attorney. And even though it was hard, I knew that that's what he wanted, and I knew that's what we were going to do. So, I mean, if you don't think that the person, your spouse, could do it, don't have your spouse do it. Yes, ma'am.
For those of us who are new to the Winchester area, does Winchester Medical Center allow or encourage pre-admittance? The hospital I came from filed your insurance, your medications, your advance directive, so everything was already in the system before you ever had a need to be in the hospital. Is that allowed or encouraged here?
I know if you're having some kind of medical treatment, some kind of medical procedure.
So you can't go and have all this thing put in?
I don't know that for a fact. But I do know if you're having a medical procedure, you do. But if you bring in your power of attorney and stuff like that and want that.
Well, it's broader than that. I mean, it's pre-admittance. So everything that you would have to, or somebody would have to fill out when you come is already in your system.
I don't think so, unless you've, have a procedure or something.
Okay.
I don't believe so. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Earlier, my name is Reen Marklin, and I am the Faith Community Nurse Coordinator for Winchester Medical Center. I'll give you, as I like to call it, my 30-second elevator speech. A faith community nurse, also known as a parish nurse, is a registered nurse with additional educational preparation in whole person health. That is care of the body, mind, and spirit, with spiritual care the hallmark of our practice.
Is anybody a member of a local congregation that has a parish nurse or a faith community nurse? Wonderful. Vicki Davies is here today to actually observe this presentation. She is a registered nurse who recently completed the faith community nurse offered locally at Shenandoah University, and we're going to be co-presenting about advanced care planning at her congregation as well as for Clark County Lions Group. If you're members of civic groups and you wish to have this information shared, we're happy to do that. We're kind of on a campaign to really promote this. Over 18 years should have an advance directive. Despite the fact that over 80% of the population believe it's important, only about 23% of the population have one. May I ask you, would you be comfortable raising your hand if you have an advanced medical directive? That's great. Well, that's wonderful, and I hope that you will leave here empowered and educated and enlightened about the importance and make plans to complete one. I would suggest within the next 30 days. And I like to say each one, teach one, so that you can encourage other folks that you care about to do this. There have been a couple of topics that were shared this morning that we nodded our heads towards each other. I'll speak to that. So if your questions haven't been answered, I tried to note some of the things that I wanted to be sure to address in addition to my mini. Just keep those great questions coming. They've been wonderful. I would call your attention to, if you have one of those blue pages, there's a glossary of terms. And there's not going to be a test on this, but I suggest that you familiarize yourself with some of the synonyms for medical power of attorney, which include things like healthcare proxy, healthcare surrogate, durable power of attorney for healthcare. We frequently refer to power of attorney, and that, as Josh said, just to underscore that is different than a medical power of attorney or those other synonyms. The roles are different. The individual or individuals that you designate may be the same person or persons. Okay? And yes, I would definitely agree that you should have a backup power of attorney, or what is the term for the successor? An example of that, other than my husband of nearly 24 years, my best friend, whom I've known for over 35 years since nursing school, you can do the math now, you know my age, she knows me best of all. She also understands the terminology. We've been in the trenches together caring for patients and our own loved ones. I wanted to designate Kathy as my healthcare proxy. And it was interesting because my husband kind of wanted that too. And when I said from the standpoint of, because Kath will be able to step up where I think you may not be able to because you won't be able to detach yourself emotionally. He was like, no, I want to be it. I can do it. I don't know if that was a male thing or, but I said, well, how about this? Kath's successor, because she will help direct you through this. Selecting your healthcare advocate, other than opening the conversation about it, is probably the most difficult part of the process, because you really need to discern carefully who that individual or individuals will be, and I have some information on helping you to make that selection. So to reiterate a couple of things, I have to keep this hand. I have a tremor in this hand, and if I hold it, it'll really shake. So, benefits of advanced directives include remaining in control of health decisions at end of life, enhanced quality of care consistent with your wishes. Your family and loved ones know your wishes and are less stressed. It decreases the financial burden as well. We didn't speak to this, but Lisa, what's probably an average stay in the intensive care unit, in a critical care unit? About $10,000 a day, which is $10,000 a day. It's not about the cost, but that is a consideration when the other facts are there that help guide you in your decision and advocating for the person that has designated you to be their medical power of attorney, or for yourself.
It also allows the healthcare providers to deliver the treatment according to the patient's preferences. Can't emphasize that enough. Patients can be undertreated or overtreated. An example of overtreatment might be IV antibiotics. If the person is not able to breathe on their own, their heart would not function on their own, there is no chance of recovery. With respect to religious beliefs, I believe in miracles. Probably most of the people in the room here believe in miracles. But when the facts are presented that the person will not breathe, their heart would not beat on its own, then those are considerations to be aware of when you're looking at the cost of care, something like antibiotics by IV that are not going to be life-preserving. Sometimes prolonged care means delaying death rather than prolonging life. Can you understand the difference? And there can be healing in the absence of cure. One of the handouts that's also there is a list of resources. It has some websites. It has some references to handouts. And these are helpful in things like communicating to your physician, beginning the conversation with your loved ones. Common barriers to completion of advanced directive include lack of knowledge, and hopefully you're a lot more, not knowing where to obtain the forms, unfamiliarity with filling out the forms, the perception that filling out the form is a difficult process. We've talked about in the state of Virginia, it simply requires 2 signatures witnessed by somebody over the age of 18. And Josh clarified, that was interesting for me to know, that while it's preferred that those witnesses are not, one of them is not your designee, it is acceptable. Because sometimes you have limited access to the people that you would prefer to be the witnesses, but they're really just witnessing your signature. They don't need to read the rest of the form. They're witnessing your signature. They're not witness to your wishes. The person you select should be familiar with your wishes. And this may seem like a simple point to need to make. However, people sometimes fill out the form and designate somebody, and they don't talk to that person about it. Can you imagine getting that phone call to discuss? You may want to decline if somebody asks you to be their healthcare surrogate, their healthcare proxy. So again, part of the selection process. Another barrier to completion is healthcare providers' discomfort with discussing advanced directives. I'll tell you, not ashamedly, but we're trying to work on this. Most nurses are not comfortable discussing this, and we're aware of this, so there's a big initiative within the hospital to get all staff, from housekeepers, chaplains certainly have comfort, but physicians, nurses, everybody should be able to say, hey, do you have an advance directive? It's as simple as this. Delaying completion until the time of crisis is a barrier, and how people wish they had that. Lisa spoke a little bit to that, to those scenarios. Reluctance to talk about death. Death is part of life. It's the completion of life. So while you may think that it's depressing or it's morbid, it's truly a gift when you open these conversations and you discuss them with the important people of your life. So I encourage you to do that. And do that around the kitchen table if possible. You know, this is a great opportunity to go forth from here the next time you're talking to somebody that's important to be part of this discussion. Say, hey, we had a neat presentation today. Do you even know about this? I really want to talk to you about this. And it's kind of like the birds and bees talk. I don't like to call it a talk. It's a conversation. Use teachable moments to expand on the conversation. It should be ongoing. And that being said, I would suggest that you look at your completed advance directive form at least once a year. We're influenced by our age. We're influenced by life experiences. We're influenced by religious beliefs, faith practices. We're influenced by our own diagnoses and diagnoses given to people that we know and love, or just stories in the news. Use those as opportunities to consider and reconsider what you have documented. The safety deposit box is not the place to have your completed form. It's safe there. Why? Because nobody can access it. That's where your other documents that you don't want to have access to might be kept. But even those, you'll have copies with your attorney. It's important to have copies certainly with your healthcare advocate. Your health, again, I'm using the terms interchangeably, your healthcare proxy. Other people that may be beyond this list that you might even think would with your beliefs as proof. This is what you said for them. The physicians that are involved in your care, you wouldn't necessarily need your dermatologist to have one, but you're under the care of a cardiologist. Cardiologist should have one. Your primary care physician, somebody that takes care of chronic diseases that would be involved in managing your care. Does that make sense? Okay. There's a misconception sometimes that an advance directive can be used to deny treatment. It's really the opposite of that. It's to help your wishes be known and understood. It's also a misconception that your family members know your wishes. Yes and no, as folks have already spoken to. My mother-in-law, whom I call Mom because she is very much Mom to me, said, now, Reen, you're the nurse, your head's on straight. We've had lots of these discussions over the years, similar to Lisa's story. I really want you to be my head. I can tell you in a heartbeat, and I love my sisters-in-law and my brothers-in-law, but I would quickly become an outlaw. I would not be an in-law. I would not be considered a daughter or a sister by other people in the family that I know would be more emotional. So I shared my mother-in-law's wishes with my husband, and I strongly encouraged her to designate him. So she designated him and her oldest daughter. So there are ways that you can share what you know to continue to advocate for the loved one, but not necessarily be a healthcare proxy. The other misconception, and Lisa mentioned this, is, other barrier to completion, is youth and good health. I don't have to worry about that now, not to worry, I'll think about that later. It's ideal to do it when you're well. I was out at the Warren County Fair last night with some other nurses from Valley Health providing heart health information, so I had my trifold board there and the forms. And I can tell you probably 8 out of 10 people that went by, and they kind of go by like, I got a will, I'm good. They have a will. But I don't think if they stayed long enough, I could ask some questions to clarify. Are they referring to a living will that's part of their advanced medical directive, or are they referring to a will that they set up with their attorney and establishing power of attorney? So we need to just get comfortable with the subject and talk about it more. The conversation project is referred to on the resource sheet. It's a great little guide for language to start the conversation. It also has a neat little grid, if you will, where you can actually score yourself on how you're inclined to make your decision. And again, as Josh said and other folks have reiterated, what you write is not in stone. It's expressed wishes and desires based on your health currently, your understanding now, and your healthcare advocate can speak on your behalf should you be unable to, based on your wishes that are known to be current. And again, different things influence those decisions. There is a type of advance directive called 5 wishes. It's not reprintable. There are some samples of it here. It's available with some directions for it at agingwithdignity.org. What I would encourage you to do, because the Virginia form is preferred, is look at the language that's on 5 wishes. I like it personally because for the decision making, because it includes spiritual care, provides information that prompts you with language that you can use on your Virginia Advance Directive form. Josh was informative when we gathered prior to this presentation to just kind of divide up the pieces that we would share with you. And it was important for me to learn that the Virginia form is preferred. It will tell you on the 5 Wishes form that it's recognized in, I think, 42 states. But based on what Josh shared from an attorney perspective, the Virginia form is preferred for Virginia state residents. You can use this as a reference. I would, combine your understanding to add to the Virginia form. You can have a typed up page that's made part of it, that's dated with your signature signed as well. Is that correct, Josh? I mean, you could just add your own addendum to the Virginia form if you were adding specifics, or just use the space. That's an advance directive, and it will say on it, and I believe it's 42 states. Virginia is one of them. But based on what Josh shared, the Virginia state form is the advisable one to have. But this is a good reference. I like
and
the
just
fact
to clarify, Reen,
sure.
You can have all of these forms should work. My comment was our goal here is to get something that a doctor is comfortable using and will use. And I'm guessing, this isn't an opinion of law, but this is what I recommend people do, is that they use the official Virginia form, the one that's drafted and in the code, because I think that's going to be more likely that a doctor is going to feel comfortable with that. The doctor is going to be less likely to use a handwritten form with scrawled on a torn off piece of sheet, even though that is technically a medical directive under law. Their other forms are in the middle of the scale, and 5 Wishes your form. But if the doctor is presented with 5 wishes or with the official form, which one is he more likely to follow? I don't know, but my suggestion is that he's going to be a little bit more likely to follow the official form. So just to clarify that. Sorry to cut you off, Reen.
No, I appreciate the clarification. We don't want to have 10 different types of forms floating around and they're all bona fide, but I'm an advocate for moving towards standardizing things. There's a national registry for advanced medical directives, so we're talking the same language. Your own personal language is yours that you include in there, but the language and the validity and the standardized application, I think, should be understood across the board and in every state. Thank you.
Oh, you can answer this. If a person has been mentally incapacitated since birth and they couldn't at any time in their life have medical directives, if 2 guardians are in place, does it require that both guardians make decisions, or is it either or guardian?
It depends on the court's order. You're talking about a guardian that's appointed for person who's incompetent or incapacitated, and that's a procedure you go through with the local circuit court, and the circuit court enters an order appointing them, and that order should specify, if there are 2 of them, whether they have to act unanimously or whether either one of them can act on their own. But the order itself should have that information in it.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned the various places we should have the medical directive. Does that mean we can copy it?
Certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, because you want to copy it and hand it out to the people whose hands should be in. One thing to clarify, right now, if you come for an outpatient procedure, not a diagnostic test, but like outpatient surgery, for example, or you're admitted to the hospital for surgery, or you're going to be admitted, I shouldn't say for surgery, if you're going to be admitted to the hospital, whether planned for an elective procedure or emergently through the emergency room, your advance directive will be scanned into the system and made part of your medical record. Part of this campaign to increase the numbers of advance directives for members of our community is to come up with a means of scanning in the event that you're not a patient. You just want to come in and have that scanned in. a medical record needs to be associated with that. When you become a patient at the hospital, you're given a medical record number. If it's not a plan and you're not emergently admitted, you don't have a medical record. So we're looking at ways to simply do that, especially with Epic. We should be able to do that.
And not again to interrupt,
No,
but
thank you.
just to, I think, respond to your question, ma'am. My comments earlier were that yes, copies work. Legally, copies are valid. But again, where I'm coming from is I want to make this really easy for the doctor to do what we want him to do. And if you have an original to hand to him, that to me is, again, I'm not a doctor. This is Josh's guessing. But that to me is going to be more persuasive and more authoritative than if you have some sort of fudged up copy that's hard to read. So, if copies, do they work? Absolutely. Are they easy to use? Yes. But if you can have an original, if it's just as easy for you to sign 5 or 6 of the same form, have a bunch of originals instead of copies, that would be my preference in an ideal world.
To distribute to the folks involved?
One of the things, and before I forget, since you get senior moments, I get senior moments.
At any age.
One of the things I would strongly encourage those of you connected with Winchester Medical Center, the question that she asked over there, we live at the village at Orchard Ridge, which is similar to this. And there's a lot of people there that have moved in from out of state because of they have family here or so forth. Now, we have rescue squad almost every day coming, picking somebody up. And it sure would be nice if they could get a medical record established, because that I would say 99% of the time Round Hill is going to bring them to Winchester Medical Center, not take them to Charlottesville. And so if there's any way you could influence that, if the people, they're here and that then could say, okay, here's this, so you have it ahead of time, because when it's an emergency, families get all frustrated and emotional and everything. And if this could be, then that would be great. One other thing while I'm thinking of it, and Josh may have to answer this, can an out-of-state person be the one to make the decision? Because I understand prior to not too long ago, for a will, they had to live in the state. But that got changed, I understand.
Okay, so let me answer. The answer to George's second question is very simple. Yes, an out-of-state person can do it.
I actually just emailed somebody from over at admissions to ask about answering your question from before, and it says advanced medical directive information can be submitted in addition to the hospital. If they have been to the hospital before, their records are already on file. They would have an existing medical record number. If they wanted to submit a living will advanced medical directive, it could be tied to their medical record number. If they have never been to the hospital before, then they don't have a medical record number, and then they would need this for us to associate a living will advanced medical directive with their record. The only way a medical record number is created is if they actually have a visit to the hospital.
Correct. And that's what I was mentioning. We are looking for a way to do that, to enhance and expedite the care process.
Yeah, well, this is what I was stressing.
Yeah, and I serve on the Patient Advisory Council, so I will take that suggestion, and the folks that serve on that team disseminate these excellent suggestions that we get from community members. So we'll see what can be done with that. I appreciate it.
I just have a question. I was recently, I went to your urgent care, okay, Valley Health Urgent Care. And from there I was sent to the emergency room, and from there I was admitted as a patient. Okay. And it was really nice having Epic, because urgent care had all my information, had it in the ER, and then had it on the floor when I was admitted to the floor. Could this, the advanced medical directive, could I take it to urgent care and have them scan it into the system?
I would say yes, because you're becoming an active patient with a medical record at
and
that
I've got
time,
a medical,
if you've not been there.
Right, I've got
yes.
a number.
Yes,
Okay.
any Valley Health sites that you are actively served through, for lack of a better word, because it might be an admission, it might be a treatment of some kind, other than currently diagnostic tests. And that's a site that I want to have individuals at to provide, whether it's month or monthly or weekly, have some folks at to provide this education and use that as an opportunity to help folks complete their forms, or at least be educated so they're able to go forth and complete their forms. Any other questions? I would add to the list of folks that you might confer with. I want to just speak briefly on selecting a healthcare proxy. I would add to the folks mentioned earlier and that you would commonly think of. Your clergy leaders, if you're active in a congregation or you have affiliation, they are known and trusted resources, and they can provide support through prayerful discernment. When we speak about suffering, people have different religious beliefs that pertain to suffering. We're not in the business of allowing people to suffer in medical care. We're in the business to provide care in the Bible. And like I said, healing even in the absence of cure. So suffering may be physical, it may be emotional, there may be spiritual suffering at the time of a healthcare crisis. And we have chaplains to address that at the hospital, and I encourage you to work with your own clergy to help you discern decisions. To reiterate some of the things we talked about earlier, in choosing a healthcare agent, not the same as a power of attorney, medical power of attorney, but not the same, but maybe the same person. They must understand and be willing to act upon your wishes. They must be able to be a strong advocate on your behalf within the healthcare system. And they must be able to handle differing opinions among family members and friends. And again, it's recommended that you choose a secondary, a successor healthcare agent. Thanks. Any other questions before I take a seat and we just open it for further questions? I think Josh has some wrap-up comments as well. Thanks for your kind attention today.
Just something quick while he's going. We had a lady that was a resident was flying down to the St. Thomas for a vacation, and this, of course, was an advanced age lady, and her son just spoke to our chaplain, and she happened to die at 35,000 feet, and he said she was going up. She just decided to keep going up.
Thank you. And thank you to Kelly and to Lisa and to Reen. That was wonderful. It's really nice, instead of you all having to listen to me for the whole time, that you actually talk to some people who deal with these. I just write them. These folks actually use them on a regular basis. So thank you all. Thank you to the whole. Two quick announcements. We'll have time for one or two questions, and then I'm going to obviously allow these folks have graciously agreed to stay here for a few minutes, so if you want to come over and ask them an individual question, you'll be more than welcome to. There is more food over there. Please help yourselves. Thank you to Westminster Canterbury for hosting us. This is fantastic, beautiful facility here. And then also, if you have more information, feel free to check out the Winchester Police Department's website. There will be links to some of the stuff we've talked about today, and we'll try to connect up with some of the Winchester Medical Center information as well. One or two questions. Yes, sir.
Can you distinguish for me, and you may be doing this in a month, the difference between having a competent, properly drafted medical power of attorney, which designates your agent, and an advanced medical directive?
Sure. And no, I will not be doing this in a month. Powers of attorney at the next section, that's going to be financial powers of attorney. So powers of attorney, an agent, a person who acts for you in the financial realm with bank accounts, selling stops, paying bills, that sort of thing. A medical power of attorney is part of an advanced medical directive. An advanced medical directive has two parts. One is what type of care you want, and two is who you want to make decisions for you. That's a medical power of attorney. That's what that is. Now, can you have a separate document called a medical power of attorney that says I appoint Bob Smith to make medical decisions for me? Yes, that's called a medical power of attorney. But you don't need that if you have an advanced medical directive, because the advanced medical directive has that in it. Does that make sense?
Not entirely, because my power of attorney has built into it both financial and actions.
A well-drafted power of attorney will have medical sections built into it, but it will also have a statement that those medical sections do not apply if you have an advanced medical directive. And if you want to get technical and legal about it, the most recent one will apply. So if you did have a medical power of attorney and an advanced medical directive, the one that would apply would be the most recent one. Does that help? Kind of? Okay. Sure.
Even if you have your medical power of attorney, it doesn't say what your wishes are. So yes, fill out your advanced medical directive. And just put the same name down. Right. And, you know, and even if he did, what if he forgot? What if he was nervous? What if he got emotional? Write your wishes down.
Great comment. Thank you, Lisa. We have time for, well, I think our time is up. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And we're seeing all of you at our next session on September 2nd. Here, same time, same place. Thank you all.